Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. This is Jim Lanigan, along with my colleague here, Marty Michael. Obviously, I was here today to attend and learn a little bit more about how to either speed up your AP process, become more efficient within AP, and become more effective. I have my colleague, as I mentioned here, Marty Michael, CEO of Miria Systems, who will be going over some cases, and on the front end, I'll be going over some challenges that you might be faced with within your AP department. So, also, if you have any technical difficulties, you see the screen up now. If you have any technical difficulty or any type of audio issues, please send an email directly to me at jenigan@miriasystems.com. And also, for any questions that you might have, you can also send them in my direction should something come up as well. So we go on to the next slide. I'd like to now introduce my colleague, Michael.
Jim, I appreciate it today, and I appreciate having me in here to talk about this. The agenda for today is the overall webinar will go about 40 minutes, give or take. We'll have some times for questions at the end. Please use the same email address we just gave for jlanigan@miriasystems.com and send any questions you may have by email at any time during the presentation. Jim will have those, and we'll try to address every question at the end of the session here. What we're going to talk about today is business challenges of accounts payable. We're going to talk about a couple case studies. We're going to talk about the different components that make up the technology for automating AP. What retail is more challenging? That's one of the themes of this webinar, and we have found that over the past few years, a lot of the large retail customers who are our clients have some fairly unique needs, and we'll touch on those as we go through, and we'll handle the questions and answers at the end as we said. First, the paid commercial really up front is who is Miria Systems. Miria is a company out of southeast Pennsylvania, We are a 25-year leader in business process automation and content enablement. We're developers of Managed Pay, which is an AP automation software solution utilized by many customers today. We're a premier IBM business partner specializing in content management and business analytics in a lot of systems. A lot of multi-industry expertise. Even though today we're going to talk from a retail perspective, we do a lot of things and a lot of solutions, including intelligent capture, document management, accounts payable, medical records, and those things. So look at the next slide here. It talks about business process automation. How do you take the manual efforts and redundancies out of the process? If you look at this slide from left to right, it's first and often about capturing the information. How do you activate it or make the content itself? For example, if you capture an invoice, how do you capture that, get it into your systems, activate it, and then socialize it or collaborate across your teams with it, analyze it, and then, of course, how do you govern it? How do you make sure that you're storing it for as long as you need to for your own internal compliance efforts or for contract reviews and those types of things? Miria is a company that has capabilities across that wide spectrum of business process automation from a content perspective. I mentioned that we're IBM Premier Business Partner. We'll use some names during the presentation. We'll use words like DataCap. DataCap is an IBM software product, one of the best on the market for capturing high volumes of documents such as invoices. Talk about FileNet, which is an enterprise content management repository. That is the preferred solution that Miria uses to store those images so that they can be retained and searched long term. And then there are other tools that we work with, including WebSphere and Cognos and Maximo and WebSphere Portal applications from IBM. And they do also work around SharePoint and other products as well. But the primary focus here is the AP automation, which relies heavily on the IBM suite of products. Let's talk about the business problem for a minute. Any application or project application you try to take to your business team or any project that you try to get approved today has to have a measurable return on investment. So we talk about AP automation. There's a few things that we can look at. First off is, what's the business challenge? A lot of the people on this webinar today are what we call multi-location retailers. They process and manage a large number of their invoices across a wide network of central and local vendors, and they have a wide array of decision makers involved in the process, such as regional managers or merchandising managers or purchasing agents that buy regionally, and vice presidents who approve for different parts of the process. The invoices are often in multiple formats. They're often based because you take advantage of local vendors, which are usually smaller companies, so it's not really a situation where you can go out and say everybody has to give me e-invoices. There's a percentage of that, but usually there's a big, also always going to be a percentage that comes into traditional life. Often they're plagued with inefficient review, match, and approval processes, high error rates when keying in data, whether that's done locally at the office location or the retail location, or if it's done centrally somewhere. There may be delays in payment processing, the loss of their credits or prepayment discounts because it takes too long to get things through the system. And lost time managing, vendor phone calls of when they're going to get paid, what status of my invoice, did you get it? And then, of course, limited visibility of cash flows has a roll up to the overall corporation. But those are some of the business challenges that we hear from our customers as we talk to them and go down the path of AP automation. So let's talk about, okay, what are the best practices? To say AP automation, and we're going to talk about AP automation today in terms of phases. Think of it as I can do little pieces today, and each one of those will have a measurable return on investment. You can phase that in, and you'll see more of that as we get to that part of the presentation. The business processes really need to enforce very strong internal controls and best practices. You may have policies for approvals and for purchasing and for who gets paid and how things get paid, but how do you manage that and enforce that if it's all based on people interacting with a manual process all the time? Processes need to be scalable and streamlined to manage costs. That's obviously one of the things we're trying to achieve here, is reduce the overall cost of paying an invoice. Manage accountability and authorizations and reviews. Provide visibility to what's going on. How much cash do I have going out tomorrow, next week, next month? What are my projections? Those things are all possible when you say automating the AP process. And then, of course, managing of vendor information, compliance and communications, and overall oversight of the whole application. But these are a list, of best practices, and there are white papers I can supply if you want to follow up with an email to Jim Lanigan. We can provide you back on white papers from third parties that'll give you much more detail than we'll let you hear today in this short time frame. So, the big issue in return on investment of what's the financial impact. First is increase on full-time equivalent productivity. How many people do you have processing AP invoices today? If the number is 50, you probably have a goal next year to reduce it to 40, not to take it to 60. Even if your company is growing by 20%, I'll guarantee you that every customer is looking for how to reduce the overall processing costs. The cost of paper handling and storage. Get to a full electronic capability to store this as opposed to sending boxes to Iron Mountain on a monthly basis. Improve the accuracy of the financial forecasting, has a direct financial impact. Docket process and flow control has financial impact. Vendor relations, the ability, that call we talked about earlier where a vendor calls in and says, hey, I just sent you the invoice, just want to make sure you got it in. That takes some time on your AP team. Then they call a week later and say, just following up to verify that invoice is in and is scheduled for payment. Then the 2 weeks, the 5 days before they're supposed to get paid, they're just calling up again just to double check and make sure that that money's going to flow through. Well, in today's world of tight credit lines and banking challenges for all the vendors, they don't really have a choice but to follow up directly and make sure that everything is ready for that invoice to be paid. They're managing cash flow down to that level in a lot of cases. So those phone calls, though, take time. And what I want to talk to you about is how do you address that by providing online access and email feedback automatically out of the system so that that vendor can track that information and gain a level of comfort. It's your option, of course. So in metrics, we're talking about costs. You know, the average money or the average dollars that it takes to process an invoice, and the source of this is taken from multiple groups, including Aberdeen and Paystream Advisors and Ardent Partners. The money it costs is on average $19 and per invoice. That's assuming 1,500 invoices per processor. The time cycle to receive and pay and approve is 10 days. The big invoices that are still paid are 80%, but you don't discount it for this factor. Even though this is sort of where the industry's at, they're still well over 75% still dealing with paper. You yourself may be down to 30%, but that 30% may still have 20 AP processors, and the ability and the return on investment is still there. If you take a look at it in terms of what's the impact of reducing the overall effort to manage and pay those invoices. So in class, numbers you're trying to hit is really get your invoice processing costs down to less than $2. Increase the number of invoices that you're handling per processor. Reduce your cycle time down to 3 days. And be able to take advantage of early payment discounts or dynamic discounting, and ensure that you have the best visibility in terms of your overall outgoing cash. Some industry drivers. This is from another survey that we borrowed here from Aberdeen Group. It talks about what are some of the business challenges coming into 2012 regarding invoicing and AP automation, and I don't think this has changed a lot. First is lack of visibility into invoices and AP documents, where everything at, whose desk is it on. Corporate directives to lower cost, obviously, and difficulty finding or managing paper documents was a driver. And there's others. I'm not going to read all this information to you. This presentation is going to be online after this, so you can certainly dig into this more. So let's talk about the technology a little bit and the components. And we framed out the business problem here a little bit. So let's sort of walk through the process. So the first part of every business process is receiving. You have to receive in the invoices from the vendor, the fact that you owe them some type of payment. You get that through mail, via paper. You may get fax, from email, from EDI, from e-invoice, or other. All of those options are pretty common today. Then to process it, you have to validate it's accurate. You have to match it possibly to a purchase order or to a requisition request. You have to make sure the right people approve it. You may send it through a workflow to make sure multi-level people approve it if it's a large invoice or a special invoice. You may need an alert if a vendor comes in that you're trying to watch or there's a problem because they have habitually give you duplicate invoices. You may have to make corrections, and you have to handle disputes, of course. And then there's that difficult part of having to pay it. Whether you pay by check, wire, ACH, P card, or whatever, you have to make sure that you're managing that down through your trade department, down to the day in a lot of cases. And maybe opportunities for discount management, and clearly, as we've talked about, the vendor asking for communications about what the status is. So this is a very high-level process of what that AP automation, business process looks like. So now what about retail? The situation changes to some degree because we like to talk about retail in terms of multi-location. Now, you may be a retailer with 5,000 store locations. You may be a retailer with 300 store locations. Each one of those locations may come under a different corporate structure. They may be regionally divided or divided by districts with regional vice presidents who do their own buying. There may be distribution channels that come into play in this where things get charged but to different charge codes in different places. And this may be a very simple process, it may be a very difficult one. But the best place to look at in terms of this is look at the metrics we talked about in terms of the costs before. How many people do you have processing? How does it take you to cycle the invoices through? And what areas of improvement you're looking for? Talk about retail. One of the values of an automated solution is that we can take that wide network of approvals that need to happen and distribute it across a web-based interface so that the action between placing the order, receiving the invoice, approving the invoice, and paying the invoice can all be managed centrally through a single system. So a good case study of this is P.F. Chang's restaurants. P.F. Chang's, which is located corporately in Scottsdale, Arizona, had roughly 350 locations when they started the AP automation process. They used to receive invoices in at each restaurant location. The general manager would hold them for a week, stick them in that FedEx package. They would go out to Scottsdale. Scottsdale would open them up. They'd send 10 of them back for approval or for questions. They back to the store location via FedEx again. They might send them to a regional general manager for approval. But either way, the process itself was costing a lot in shipping charges. The time to process those invoices was taking well over the 30-day norm, and we certainly weren't able to take advantage of prepayments, and we were dealing a lot of times with penalties for not being able to process them efficiently. The options there were, hey, let's just do this. Let's send all of our invoices to Scottsdale first. So then you move from decentralized distribution to a centralized receipt of the invoices, and that in itself doesn't necessarily solve the whole problem. It helps it, but it doesn't solve the entire problem. So what the solution was is we put in a solution called Managed Pay. You'll see in a few minutes, with a web-based solution. Today, the life of the general manager is they take their invoices every day, they stick them on the fax machine, they hit a button. They don't have to do anything with them because the system can read off of the fax machine, read the invoices in, store the image of the fax machine, enter the data off of the invoice directly back into their accounting and ERP system so that it's queued for approvals before it goes to queued for payment, and then present that invoice electronically back to the same general manager where he can approve it online. There needs to be a routing approval done to a regional manager or internal controller. That is all done automatically by business rules that are established in the system. So hopefully you can sort of get the understanding of the business case there that I think is very applicable to a lot of our retail clients. And this is just a little quote from the Director of Operations at the time, sort of repeats a little bit about what I just said. As I said, this will be online out there whenever you're ready to view it and follow up. The requirements, when you talk about this of retail AP, what do you have to address? You have to address how do I scan or get the paper invoices in? What are my workflows that I need to manage? How do I pre-match the approvals and the processes? How do I send out email notifications? I mean, in some cases today, we talk with people who say they're automated because they have the ability to scan it in and read it, and then it goes into a process of a series of emails looking for approvals before they remotely queue up. You can do that. It's better than sending the paper back and forth, but it's not the most efficient way to manage the entire process. So talk about the whole AP automation solution, and we're going to break it down into components for a moment. As I said earlier, it's very possible, and it's actually even recommended that you phase in your approach to automating AP rather than just coming in and trying to do the whole thing at once. So when you talk about this solution, or here the Maya solution, I know this slide's small, but it says capture. That's the first part. How do I receive my invoices in, by mail, by fax, by EDI, or whatever? The second part of that is that when I get the invoice in, I now need to scan it. But when I scan it, I can't just take a picture of it and store it. I need to convert the image back into text. I need to be able to read that. So I OCR it, optical character recognition. This is where that DataCap IBM product comes in, and we code it. We turn it back into text. Then we do what's called indexing, which means we bring off the relevant data. Who do we pay? How much is the amount of payment? And so on. And validate that information against existing systems. And down at the bottom, the down arrow here, the orange arrow going down, we just want to retain that invoice. We don't want to keep the PER and have to pay it, send it to Iron Mountain at the end of the month. We need to keep the actual invoice. We don't want to just send it, put the data in the system, and then destroy it. So the CMS, the content management system, comes in now, and that is a repository, for your internal policy, whether it's 7 years or 10 years or 1 year, to retain that invoice. It goes into there where we can make it searchable, also archivable, so that you always have that invoice. When I talk about validate the invoice, though, we don't just read it off. The OCR technology today is tremendous, and DataCap is the best at it. But when we validate it, we want to be able to check that, for example, if we read the invoice and say that this invoice is from Coca-Cola Company, and we want to be able to check that against maybe our purchasing system, if they put a purchase order on it, to validate that the purchase order that we matches the actual invoice. So today you probably have somebody doing that that's responsible. Did I receive what I purchased order for, and does my invoice match what my purchase order is? Well, this matching process can happen automatically within the software, so that all you're looking at is the exceptions. The system actually, we set up rules, and we go through each line item to identify exceptions and pull them out, and everything else can process all the way through without anybody handling it. We do the same thing with inventory. If you're pulling in line item invoices and you want to send that information and say, hey, we received in this packing slip, for example, for 100 items, and we want to enter that in inventory, we can take that same data and put it back into your inventory system if you want to, as well as purchasing at the same time. And of course, there's the third box down at the bottom is entering all the relevant information back into your accounting system. Great Plains, it's SAP or whatever. You may have some functionality around some of these tools, but we're really trying to illustrate today that you have to look at the whole business process of AP to know that. Now, the other components there that just come onto the screen right now at the top, you'll see e-invoices. You may be receiving e-invoices today through a vendor portal. You may also have purchasing cards internally that you utilize for certain things, where you get a statement, for example, from American Express or Visa or someone else that's managing your purchasing cards, and that comes across into the system. We have travel expenses. The same system we've got right now could also be used, and several clients use it to manage their internal time expenses for, their travel expenses. And then the EDI interfaces, where you may be receiving invoices from very large vendors. You may be receiving that completely EDI-based. And the same system now allows you to pull all that into the same location. There's a big blank spot on the screen here, and what's there is really the workflow. This is where you manage the interaction that goes on between all of this systems through the approval process. What's the purchasing detail? How do I take an invoice that needs to be approved by 3 different people and wrap that, get them all to approve it? This is where the workflow comes in that's part of an inherent, complete AP automation solution, and I'm going to hit a couple examples. So just down a minute on capturing, where I actually have an invoice that shows, and there's 4 blocks on there. The first block is the green, upper corner, and you'll see there where it says invoice date, invoice number, amount due, and due by date. All of those things actually be extracted off to there and put right into the system. The software will read that invoice for you, eliminating manual handling. And in the purple box, we look at where's the remittance information. We're going to pull that off, and this is where that validation comes in. So we'll pull off the remittance information. The software will also validate against your master vendor list to make sure that that's accurate. We can prevent you from, bringing in or processing an invoice for somebody who's not already a approved vendor in your list. The blue is up discount information, and the yellow box on there is all the line item detail. This is where you can choose to pull this off or not. We have several customers who just take the summary data and they don't worry about the detail because they've already captured that in another system such as inventory or their purchasing system. But this is not a take everything or leave it situation. You can approach this from your exact business needs. Now, when I talk about the overall processing of this vendor purchasing, track expenses, and e-invoice, there's a word there for vendor portal. Now, you may have vendors today, that are calling you or they're sending you information through emails or maybe emails bouncing in the junk email. The advantages of vendor portal is to allow collaboration with the vendor in a way that allows you to be able to communicate to them. For example, a vendor under the Miria vendor portal should be able to log onto the system and say, okay, I'm from XYV vendor. I want to check the status of this invoice and see if it's in your system. And we can control what they see and what they don't. You might want them to see that you're going to pay it in 2 weeks. You want them just to confirm that it's in there and it's queued for payment. Those things are all configurable about your need, but what they're really targeted for is improving vendor communications and eliminating the phone calls coming into your AP department. And by the way, even the best portal is not going to stop everybody from calling you. There's still that comfort level that they get from calling into your location, but it's a step in the right direction of improving your communications with them. I talked about putting all that images into the CMS. We do for most customers, the system goes into FileNet, which is one of the best and one of the most robust content management systems out there. It could be another system. It could go in SharePoint. It could go into Fresco. But store those images in that system. We have the ability to index them and make them searchable. So you want to come back in later and say, show me all the invoices for product A or product B over the last 2 years with this vendor. We can create those type of searches for you and bring up the actual invoices and bring up those details if you want to do it. So it becomes, to some degree, an archiving tool and a business intelligence tool if you want to do it. But we look at it as a side benefit of AP automation. The overall validation and integration of how that works with those back-end systems, the managed pay solution, as our other AP solutions, are not dependent on your ERP. So it doesn't matter whether you have SAP or Oracle apps or Great Plains. In many cases, the AP automation solution can and should be independent of those and fit in between them all. You don't go and buy a bunch of user licenses for those big back-end applications. A solution like this helps you fill the gap between all the different parties that are acting around your AP process. So let me just jump ahead here. I'm just going to show you a couple, 2 or 3 workflows. So this here shows, I mentioned before, workflows. It's a very powerful part of an AP automation solution. You could be just capturing in your invoices. But if you're walking through a complete solution, you want the ability to trigger certain things. If, for example, you have payment process that's very complicated because you have particular internal controls in place, that can be modeled visually here. And I'm not going to try to explain this slide. It's complicated, but look at it in the sense of a flow chart of the system. We create these flow charts within the system. That in part creates rules that manages the flow. Now, some good examples, though, you might have one process for purchase order invoices that's purchase order-based invoices and another one for non-PO invoices. You also may have, for example, tax issues. If you sell petroleum as part of your retail and you're trying to capture all of your transactions around petroleum for different reasons for that, you may want to be able to trigger all of those invoices, run to a different workflow through this so that a tax or a petroleum accounting group can see that information. Or if it's a specific tax such as liquor, you want to capture that information out and run those invoices through a routing. And maybe not even the whole invoice, but maybe just a few line items of the invoice apply to some of these things. But we can model these different scenarios so that we trigger this workflow from the same trigger of the invoice coming in and routing through the different processes. So I'm not going to spend much more time on this. I just want to show you some examples of some basic workflow processes for your view. So let's just real hit quick. We got about 10 minutes before I finish up on a couple of things. I want to talk about a couple of real-world scenarios. I already gave the P.F. Chang's story. Another large vendor that uses this solution very heavily is Cabela's, which is a large, very large sporting goods and retail outdoor outfitter retail chain where they're opening a lot of stores and they're growing quite rapidly. They have a very, very wide array of products that they handle, so they have a very wide, a very long list of vendors as well. So in Bella's case here, I used sort of the same slide and just walk you through from top left to bottom right. You'll see that we utilize the capture of invoices through the IBM DataCap solution, where we capture a good portion of all the paper-based solutions. The same DataCap is receiving in the emails and the faxes invoices that come in from different vendors. When we code and we decode and validate, we're doing that back against a JDA back-end purchasing system as well as JDA accounting system. And then we bring their LDAP hierarchy, comes in and brings in all their user base so that the ring of approvals is already built in their LDAPs, so there's no duplication of effort of loading it from one system to the other. We know who reports to who, and we can utilize that with some special business rules to manage that routing in those workflows. And within their case, they have a very high volume of invoices, and that IBM FileNet P8 as the back-end repository gives them a great deal of value because, they're literally bringing in millions of invoices through the same process. And the managed pay, which is, I mentioned, is a miria product. I mentioned it early in the presentation. We're not going to demonstrate it, by the way, today. The demonstration of managed pay, actually, requires a little bit more time to walk through the interfaces and how that works. And we prefer to do that one-on-one. So if you're interested in that, please drop an email to Janigan at Miria Systems, the same email that we're using here, and we'll certainly schedule that for you. The P.F. Chang's, I've already mentioned this, but it's a little bit more simple. They're not utilizing the P cards and the other back-end interfaces to bring in invoices and payment transactions. Their ERP system, in their case, is Great Plains. There is an interaction with the inventory and point of sale system to capture the line item detail back into the inventory. We're using exactly the same type of LDAP hierarchy back off of our LDAP system to be able to manage that routing and approval process in the system. So overall, the AP solution looks a lot like this block diagram that I started with. Keep in mind that part of this is really that managed pay workflow solution. We work today with different capture solutions, and we work with different content management solutions. Now, I did say early on that you might want to consider phasing. This may be a daunting to somebody who is at an early stages of AP automation, and it may be a question, how do I get all this done? You have to. You can actually get a very huge return on investment just by implementing DataCap and the invoice ingestion piece of that. So it would be preferred that you route it through the entire process. We may also just want to bring that automation of those invoices in and extract that data out so that you can upload it into your system as a first phase, and then maybe second phase would mean that you implement a system that works more real time and you continue to streamline it in phases. In some cases, we've gone in to customers and implemented this whole solution in 90 days. In other cases, we've got customers that are taking 2 years to get from, just scanning the invoices in the first year to the complete automation of the process over 3 years. So this is a picture of, I said there was no views of managed pay. This is actually a screenshot just to kind of give you a summary view of how it looks. Managed pay does create sort of an index pane, sort of that Outlook look and feel, so that you manage the routing of invoices and everything on the left. The dashboarding here is kind of giving you an indication of what the metrics are that you can start managing, such as, what average time to process, what is your invoice or scanning inputs per month, what's the vendor invoice analysis, what did you pay on time, what did you pay early, what did you pay late in some situations. We can model these dashboards. These are all customizable the way you want them to be for your organization. And so we're at about our 35-minute mark here as planned. We want to make sure that we can address some questions. It looks like we've been getting a few in here. So let me bring up the first one here, and we'll address that. Okay, you got them on the slides? Okay. First question, how long does it take to complete an accounts payable automation project? Well, I sort of just addressed that. I mean, the big question is it, or the answer is, it depends. And to do it correctly, you have to have commit from your business group, the AP automation and that, and you have to have commitment from your IT group internally. While we can implement managed pay on a hosted solution on the cloud, it doesn't have to be an internal IT project. In order to get the data into your accounting systems and to get data to validate, there has to be some level of interaction with your IT group. It won't do any good just to put it out on the cloud and then you still have to go and put or key all your back-end information into your own ERP system. Managed pay is not a replacement for your accounting system. It's essentially between the world and that back-end accounting to start plugging the gaps and to automate, handling of transactions. I allow, anywhere between 3 and 12 months to complete the whole process, depending on your level of IT commitment and your level of commitment to how much you're going to do in the first phases of this. Second question, I already have a scanning solution to automate invoice capture. Will your product still be able to improve our operation? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of what we look at is invoice volume. If we look at it, you're already scanning your invoices and your invoice volume is relatively minor, then we would probably recommend that you stick with what you're doing. Although managed pay, per se is not expensive, it's not expensive really to put this whole solution in. Typically you can get an ROI, or return on investment, of 9 months depending on where you're at when you start. If you already have scanning available, that's the biggest ROI, frankly, because you may need 40 people keying in invoices and man paper, and if you've already taken that down to 20, your next phase is going to get you from 20 down to 10 in terms of the major ROI or your headcount impact. The benefit is in the second part is, or the broader AP automation process is not so much in headcounts in the second part, it's in processes internally, such as exception management and being able to report on that information, and visibility, of course. We don't have a IT budget. What is the best way to get started? You can get started with with accounts payable in scanning, what we call intelligent capture in handling for a little, probably somewhere as between $25,000 and $50,000, with the emphasis being on the $50,000 side, depending on what you need or how many invoices you're processing and how many people are involved. I always recommend that we start there because, as I said a moment ago, it's the easiest return on investment. If you're not sure and you're trying to do an internal justification, the easiest start is maybe to spend a few dollars and an internal study that maps out exactly where you're at in terms of what we call AP automation maturity and exactly what it would cost you to go from where you're at today to a fully automated process. That can be done for, $1,000 to bring in a consultant for a few days and walk through your processes and give you a report on that. You can do that through us. You can do it through independent providers like PayStream Advisors or those types of companies that do this for a living. On your website, you suggest that managed pay can also be used to manage other processes such as warranty tracking and rebate management. Can you explain that further? Yes, today's focus is on the management of invoices and accounts payable. We applied exactly the same business process automation theories and the same technology to automating other processes within retail organizations. For example, we have a client who manages a huge specialty order group where everything is basically made to order, a lot of artwork that has to be approved, there's a lot of communications back and forth. It usually starts with a customer requisition that's put on a piece of paper, and then there's artwork sent back and forth, so there's pictures and images that have to be managed. We ran all that through the same processing system and allowed the customer to interact back, or allowed our client to interact back with their customer and with their print op and with their graphic artists, and bring it into one single operation so that they streamline the process. In terms of warranty tracking and rebate management, if you have rebate cards, if you're still using paper rebate cards, or even if you're getting them by electronic registration, you may want to bring those into a system, and managed pay can be modified to be able to process those type of transactions as well, whether they start out by a paper warranty card or product registration, or they start out by a web form that gets entered. If you don't have a place to put that information today, it's a good place to start. We also said that this solution handles travel expenses back and forth. One of the things we uniquely for some of our customers is reverse the travel expense process from using down and putting in all your receipts at the end of the week and going in and saying, okay, here's all of my expenses, and send it through. We actually have direct wires from credit card companies, so if you're a traveler, then you're using an American Express card. When you come in to fill out your expense report, you actually get the American Express bill shows to you in the system. You utilize that to match your receipts to it, and so that greatly streamlines the amount of data input and the data errors that happen on the side of the traveler. So there's a lot of flexibility there in the overall system. If you have a need that's accounts payable, I would suggest that we have a private dialogue and we can try and dive into the details. Are there any questions? At this point, that is all the questions that we did receive in today. It's 1:45, and we're at the end of our timeline here. So, without further going on with it any further, I just want to remind you that if you have questions, please send an email to jlanigan@systems.com. This presentation, along with the auto portion, we'll post it up online on our website sometime within the next 48 hours, and please feel free to visit it, forward it on to your colleagues or other people who may have a question, and we're here to serve you and help you in any way we can. So thank you. I appreciate everyone's time today. Please have a great evening and a great weekend. Thank you.